Hey guys, it's Laney and welcome back to the shop. I got a great weekend project for you, and it's this Oak KnickKnack Cabinet. Now this cabinet can be wall hung or it can sit on a tabletop or shelf. It's easy to make, you can do it in a weekend, and it's got some nice little features that make it stand out. And some of the notable features are this coven bead molding that wrap around the top and bottom, the face frame and inset door that are assembled with open slot mortise and tenon joints. The door glass is divided with these wood muntins that are mitered into the door frame. Now we're going to talk more about these muntins and some of the options that you can do with them. You can add more, or you can actually take them out and have just an open glass panel to give it a different look. On the inside of the cabinet, we've got a couple of shelves that are either fixed or adjustable, and it'll be your option, and we'll talk about those options when we get further into this. And on the back of the door are a couple of glazing strips that hold the glass in and can be removed in case you ever need to replace that glass for any reason. The cabinet itself is finished off with some colonial style hardware, and we're going to talk more about some different hardware options that you can choose to kind of give it a different look. All in all, it's an easy project. There's going to be a lot of different options, some variations you can do with it yourself, and have a little fun with it. So let's get reset up and we'll get right into it. Alright guys, we're set up here over at the miter saw to go ahead and rough cut our parts for the case of the cabinet. Now all of the parts can be cut out of one 8-foot 1x6, and we're going to go ahead and rough cut them to size, and we'll finish up and square them up and cut them down to size on the table saw sled. Now with those parts cut, we can go ahead and get everything set up on the table saw and cut them down to size. Okay, now that all the parts for the case are rough cut to size, the one thing I like to do is to lay them out and go ahead and mark the individual components so they don't get confused in the process. And a great way to do that is by just taking some blue tape. And the first thing you want to do is you want to go through, look at your pieces, determine what's going to be the face of your parts. And once you have that determined, you can go ahead and just simply take blue tape. Now you can write on your boards, but by having the blue tape on there, it'll stay on there throughout the whole process, and it'll save on some of the sanding that you have to do, because sometimes when you mark on wood, if you mark too deep, then you have to sand a lot just to get that pencil mark off if you didn't have a light touch, you know, when you were making your marks. But what I like to do is go ahead and put a piece of blue tape on every piece. The blue tape, one, indicates that this is going to be the face of my project. And then I can simply write on there what each component is. This piece here is going to be the case bottom. Case top, shelf 1 and shelf 2. Over here we have the left side of the case and the right side. Now, from there, I can go ahead and determine the top and the bottom of my sides. So we'll have the top, and I'm just putting a T for top and a B for bottom. And don't need that big of a piece. Put that there and that there. Got the left and the right side. Give yourself enough room when you're putting your tape on because you're going to be, these are cut down to rough size, so we have to get them down to their final dimensions on the table saw. So give yourself enough room to cut that board down to its final dimension. All right, on the two shelf pieces, we've got the tops of them marked in the face. So they're pretty much done. They're ready to go. The top and bottom, same thing. Those we can set aside. We need to concentrate now on the left and right side. After we get everything cut down to size, we're going to go ahead and be putting rabbets on each of the sides to accept the top and bottom, as well as dados if you're going to have a fixed shelf, or shelf pin holes if you're going to have an adjustable, and we'll get into that when we get into doing the shelves. So let's go ahead and take all of our boards now that are marked over to the table saw, get them cut down to their final size and squared up, and then we'll be ready to start making the dados and rabbets in these pieces to get everything ready for assembly. Alright guys, I'm over at the table saw and I've got everything set up. My stop block is set for 11 inches and that is the measurement for the cut of the top, bottom, and the two shelf pieces. When we get ready to cut the sides and get them squared up and everything, we'll change everything around a little bit. But we're ready to go ahead and make our 4 cuts to square up the ends of these pieces and get them down to their final length, and then we can move on to the two sides and get ready to start making the rabbits and dados. Alright, now with those cuts made, we can go ahead and adjust our stop block and get everything set up for the two side pieces to square them up. Alright guys, once we have all of the case pieces cut down to their final dimensions and squared up, we need to go ahead and take the two shelves and rip them down to 5 1/4 inches wide. So we'll do that over here at the table saw, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright guys, with the shelves cut down to 5 1/4 inches, we can now take the top and bottom in two pieces, two sides of this case, over to the router table and get the rabbets cut into the back of them that will accept the back panel, where the back panel is going to be recessed into the back. So we'll get set up at the router table and get that step done. Then we can focus on the dados for the two shelves, and we'll talk about your options for whether you want fixed or adjustable shelves in that step. Alright guys, now that everything is cut down to its exact size, we need to go ahead and take a few little steps to identify the front and the back of the two sides and the front and the back of the top and bottom. So once again, just going to take a little piece of tape . And lay everything out. And on these pieces of tape, you can go ahead and mark the back, front, back. And that will allow these to sit just like this. Back, front, back. Those are done. Top and bottom, go ahead and look and see my front, my back, front and back. Now that everything is marked and identified, I will not have any problems in when I'm processing these boards through their next cuts and their dados and rabbets and everything. I won't get confused as to what cuts go where. On my top and bottom piece, I need to go ahead and cut the inch rabbet in the back for the back panel to recess into. And for the side pieces, I need to cut the rabbets at each end. They're going to be 3/4 inch rabbets, 3/8 inches deep. There is a rabbet all the way down each back of each side, and there will be the dados for the two shelves. Alright guys, over here at the router table, I got a 1/2 inch spiral bit in the router. I've got the height for that bit set at 3/8 of an inch. I've got my fence set for 1/8 of an inch back, so I can create that rabbet on all four pieces, the two sides and the top and bottom, that will accept the back panel of this case. So with everything set, I can now go ahead and make those cuts, and then we can move over to the table saw and get the dados cut in, and we're about ready for assembly. So now with those rabbets cut across the back, we can go ahead and get our layout lines for our shelf placement and get ready to move over to the table saw and get those dados cut in and get this thing ready to assemble. Alright guys, before we go over to the table saw to cut these rabbets and dados, we need to go ahead and lay out some lines for our cuts. And all the rabbets that go in the two ends, as well as the dados, they're going to be 3/8 of an inch deep. They're going to be 3/4 of an inch wide. So I want to go ahead and start off by making our first mark for the rabbet. For each side. And from that mark, our first shelf is going to be 5 1/4. So I'm going to set my square at 6 inches. Go ahead and make that mark. I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. And then I'm going to set my square for 6 3/4 inches. Alright guys, now that we've made the marks for our shelves, we can go ahead and set up the dado sled on the table saw and get these cuts made. But before we do, I want to talk to you about some options. If you did not want fixed shelves in your cabinet and you wanted your shelves to be adjustable, you can simply make your marks accordingly for those shelf pins. Make sure that they are evenly or equally spaced on both sides of each side piece so that your shelf sits level. An aid in doing that is getting yourself a shelf pin drilling jig or making one out of the shop. Now this is just a piece of pegboard with a fence. Everything is cut dead square, and I've got it set up to where my shelf pins, when the fence is placed up against the side of the board, when I drill my shelf pins, they are placed 1 inch from the edge. Turn it over, 1 inch from the edge. And I have indicator lines that I can line up my marks to ensure that my pins are even all the way across so I do not have a wobbly or tilty shelf. Now here's the thing, in my opinion on adjustable shelves, when I put adjustable shelves in a cabinet, I will make my center mark where my shelf is going to sit. From that mark, 1 inch down or 1 inch up, I drill 3 holes. My center hole where the shelf's going to sit, or I have the option of adjusting it up by 1 inch or down by 1 inch. There's no need to drill holes up and down both sides all the way on this cabinet, because you're really not going to make that drastic of an adjustment on your shelves to space them out with the size of this cabinet. And most cabinets, I only give that option of a 1 inch up or 1 inch down in any direction on any shelf I use. So think about that. There's no need to drill holes all the way up and down. Just get your center placement, 1 inch from that down, 1 inch from that up. That's all the holes you need for that one shelf. Make your marks the same thing for the next shelf. Do it on both sides. Make sure that your marks are even all the way across so you don't have a wobbly shelf. Nobody likes a wobbly shelf, and you'll be good to go. So with that being said, this shelf is getting fixed. I'm sorry, this cabinet is getting fixed shelves. We're going to go ahead and set up the dado sled on the table saw and make our cuts. Now you don't necessarily need to have a dado sled for your table saw to make these cuts. You can make them with a router. You can make them on the router table, and you can make them on the table saw with your miter gauge. There's a lot of different options that you can do with it. So, but I happen to have a dado sled and a dado stack on the table saw, so that's what I'm going to use to make these cuts. So let's get over there and do that, and let me stop talking so much. How about that? All right. Okay guys, over at the table saw, I've got my table saw sled set up with my depth gauge to set my blade height. I got my fence or my stop block set up for the first cut, which is the 2 rabbits on each end of the side pieces. But before I make any cuts or anything, I've got a piece of scrap stock out of the same board that the parts of the case are made out of, and I'm going to do a couple of test cuts, and in those test cuts I'm going to check my fit as well as the depth of the cut. Now even though the oak pieces are 3/4 of an inch thick, I didn't put a 3/4 dado set in my table saw. I put a 23/32 with a couple of shims. I've got, I think, 2 4/1000ths of an inch shims, a 200th of an inch shim, and an 8/1000th of an inch shim in there to get close to 3/4 but not quite. And I'm going to run that test cut first and see how my fit is. I want a nice friction fit, not too tight and definitely not too loose. I'll test my fit off that, and if I need to, I'll either add another shim in there, or if my cut's fine, then I'll go ahead and proceed with my cuts on my actual work pieces. So with everything set, I'm going to flip my stop block out of the way. I got a flippable stop block, and I'm going to make a first test cut right in the middle of this scrap piece. Now with that cut made, I'm going to take one of my shelf pieces. And I'm going to check my fit. And it looks like my fit on this is too small for the depth, or for the width. And let me check the depth while I'm at it. So I need to reset up the dado stack and add another shim. I'm not that far off. Let's see how my depth is. Okay, need to go ahead and raise that up just a hair. And I'll go ahead and set up the new dado stack, or I'll add a shim to the dado stack, not the new dado stack. And we'll run another test cut. Okay, made the adjustments that I needed to make. And now I'm going to run another test cut and see how we are. And that's the fit I want, a nice friction fit. So let me check my depth. And if everything checks out with that, we're all set. All right, so now I can go ahead and make my cuts on my actual work pieces. Outstanding. Make a slight adjustment on that. Now I can go ahead and flip my stop block down and make my 2 rabbit cuts on each end of the boards, and then I can reset my stop block to make my 2 dados. I want to show you something. If you notice on these rabbet cuts on the end, you'll see a small little piece that's left over. I want that for the simple fact that when I glue these pieces together, of course I'll clean this up before I glue them together, I want this a little proud. That way I can run it with a flush trim bit after all the assembly is done and make it look like it was meant to look the first time around. Just really tight, clean look. So I left that little tip on there purposely so that my side piece is a little proud, and then I can go through, and after the case is glued up, I can run it through the flush trim bit and clean everything up nicely. So now I can go ahead and reset my stop block and make these next cuts, these next dados, and we'll be all set. I must have a clog in my vacuum line somewhere. I'll have to hunt it down. It started flinging some sawdust towards the end, last couple cuts. So now with that done, and I'm going to tilt this up so you can see me. Try to do it smoothly. So now with those cuts made, we've got our dados for our shelves, we've got our rabbets for our top and bottom, and we've got our rabbet for our back panel. We can go ahead and set up on the assembly table. First thing we want to do is go ahead and sand the inside of these pieces before we do, glue everything up. It's a lot easier to go ahead and pre-sand them now. And that's when you can make an option of pre-finishing the inside before you do the glue up. Now this is a small cabinet, and I'm using an oil base. It's a tung oil finish. It's a tung oil varnish to finish it off. And on the inside, if you're worried about the smell of oil, or the oil smell or an odor on the inside of this cabinet by doing the tung oil in the inside, I haven't had any problem with that. But one thing that you can do is you can use a nice shellac, clear shellac to do the inside, or you could do your oil finish, and when it cures real well, then you can finish it off with a thin coat of shellac over that. But that's something that you'll need to determine, before you do your glue up and everything, if you want to go ahead and pre-finish the inside panels. With this case being so small, and with the oil finish and everything, I'm going to go ahead and sand my inside. But I'm not going to pre-finish it. I'll finish it all when after I do the glue up. But that's a preference. On bigger cases, before I do a glue up, I always pre-finish my internal parts. But something on this small, I don't need to do that step. I want to go ahead and get this sanded and get it ready for glue up so I can start working on the face frame and get that ready to attach and then start working on the door. Alright, so let's get set up on the workbench again and get this pre-sanded and get over to the glue up and start working on the face frame. See you in a minute. Alright guys, we got all the parts finished for the case. Now all we have to do is go ahead and pre-sand them, pre-finish the insides if you wish, and glue this case together. While the glue is drying, we can go ahead and start working on the face frame, inset door, the buttons, as well as the trim. The face frame and the door are assembled with open slot mortise and tenon joints, and we're going to get to that in the next video. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the project in part 2 of this video. I'm going to end part 1 here. Go ahead and pre-sand your pieces and get them ready for glue up, and then we'll get ready to start working on the frame in the next video. So stick around. If you have any questions, you can email me at Laney@asimpledesignofocala.com, and I'm going to have plans available for this project on asimpledesignofocala.com. I hope you're enjoying it so far, and we'll see you in the next video. Guys, before I roll the credits on this video, I'd like to send out a message to Steve Ramsey of Woodworking for Mere Mortals. Now, while I was filming this project, I was also in the process of putting together a big surprise for Steve. And I could not have pulled it off without the help of many of you out there. Many woodworkers gathered together to make this possible. And Steve got a new table saw. If you haven't seen the video of Steve's reaction and on this story, I'll post a link of it right here. Steve, you inspire us all. You give us mere mortals hope and inspiration that we can go out in the shop and make something creative as well. Week after week you entertain us, you make us laugh, and you teach us something. Don't ever underestimate your ability, my man, and don't ever underestimate your value. You're loved by many. I consider you a great friend, and I'm blessed to have met you and that our paths have crossed. I'm so happy that I was able to do this. I couldn't have done it alone. And I'm so happy this was able to happen for you. I look forward to seeing your projects. And I hope that you have many years of good use out of this saw. We love you. Happy woodworking, my friend.